I'll introduce myself again. My name is Jasser. I'm Deputy Director at TVP World. President Kwaśniewski doesn't really need an introduction, but I'll do it anyway.
Let's do it. You know, time is time. Yeah. Go.
Okay, I can go straight to the anecdote I planned for today. Is that all right?
Please. It's all right. It's very good. Yeah.
Well, you know, because there's a disclosure I need to make. I know President Kwaśniewski as a journalist longer than would be comfortable saying in polite society. Let's say 30 plus, okay? And I want to tell you one of the first meetings we had in Polish Parliament. Is that all right? Can I?
You can. I'm nervous, but I wait for the story, you know, please.
So, this was 1991, and President Kwaśniewski was not yet President Kwaśniewski. He was head of the Polish Social Democrats in Parliament. An important bill was going through the House. It was mass privatization. And the Social Democrats and Mr. Kwaśniewski were a bit skeptical, to say the least, about this legislation. Eventually, it turned out they were quite right about it. But to the surprise of everybody, in the end, they voted along the Solidarity government of the time to pass the legislation. So I reported it back to, as a young Reuters correspondent, I reported it back to my bureau, and then I left Parliament. And I see Mr. Kwaśniewski, together with another colleague, going for the car. So I rushed up to him and I said, Mr. Kwaśniewski, if I may, what happened? Why did you vote in favor of this measure you had criticized? And without missing a beat, President Kwaśniewski replied to me, so that Reuters can report that Polish ex-communists are market-friendly. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I remember very well. Maybe not this conversation exactly, but the problem. Because this problem for this, how you called us post-communists, was a very serious one. And mainly the members of my caucus, we were number 2 in the parliament. We had 60 members of the parliament. The biggest Unia Demokratyczna, Democratic Union, they have 62 only. So that was really the second biggest group in the parliament. And I tell you, I remember it was a whole night debate about this program. And finally, with the group of so-called liberals close to me, we decided to vote in favor of this bill. Today, I have more doubts as so many years ago, you know, different story. I didn't change my mind like Jeffrey Sachs, for example. No, don't compare me with this guy. But finally, we decided to support this bill. And I tell you, in my opinion, it was one of such turning point of the history of social democracy, this new social democracy in Poland. Because to accept this pro-market orientation was not easy, but decided. The second such decisive moment was our debate about NATO. Because those time in our group we had such alternative, the so-called Finlandization or NATO. And of course, Finlandization means neutrality, what was a good concept for Finland, for Austria during Cold War. It was absolutely, in my opinion, wrong in this new era, when we have no longer Cold War, we have a new situation, geopolitical situation, and to accept neutrality of Poland, in my opinion, it would be a decision to stay in some kind of gray zone. And especially from today's perspective, we can understand how it would be a big mistake. But we were right. So that's, I remember this.
Well, you didn't allow me to introduce you, but I was going to mention the fact that you were elected twice, and you were in office for 2 consecutive terms, from 1995 to 2005. And you were among the leaders that took Poland into NATO first in 1999, and then into the EU in 2004. But can we now switch the subject to something more contemporary, Mr. President?
Yeah, we should, of course. But first of all, I would like to thank you for this very kind invitation. I'm very honored that I'm the first speaker here. I'm like a bridge between the history and the future. And I want to mention 3 persons I see in the first row of the audience, because I remember our first meeting with Kasia Pisarska, Zbyszek Pisarski, when they were students in Georgetown University. This is after my presidency, 2006, 2010. They had a lot of ideas, very talented people, and I was sure that they did a lot. And I'm so glad that I see Kasia and Zbyszek with such successes, not only professors, but also the creators of this forum, etc. Congratulations. I'm glad that to some extent my kids are making such nice career. But I have to mention also General Piotr Błazeusz, because maybe you don't know this story, but that's his 99. Bill Clinton, President of the United States, came to Warsaw. It was after decision, and Poland is a full member of NATO, after Madrid summit. We had such nice event, close on the square next to Royal Castle in Warsaw. And we invited on the stage you were lieutenant, no, what was? Second lieutenant, you know, that was the first who finished American military school. Young man, he looks more or less similar, well, not same, but similar. It was still 26 years ago. And when I see the career of this man, I'm extremely satisfied. I think that is the next evidence that this time, 95, 2005, was a good time for Poland. We used all opportunities. We find time, we find place to go to these very important trains to the future. So I'm satisfied, and I'm very glad that I met such people like you, and that you continue this mission to make Poland more safe, more developed, and Europe better, and the world better.
Right. Well, let's
applause now.
A round of applause.
And now, please, question.
But let's move forward 20 years on, and you know it just took 2 rounds of voting in the German parliament to approve the new chancellor, Friedrich Merz. And the symbolism of that moment was not lost on anybody. The pro-European center is in trouble in Europe. So the question to you, I'm not trying to spoil the mood, but the question to you is, you know, what has happened to the pro-European forces that so many voters in Europe these days vote for parties which are Eurosceptic and want to change this project, leading possibly to its collapse?
Yeah, but I tell you, that you mentioned this yesterday's situation with Merz, that is very, very important, because frankly speaking, I was very satisfied, and these 2 biggest, oldest German parties signed the coalition agreement, because for me, it was a symbol and signal that in Europe, pro-European, pro-democratic and pro-Ukrainian forces in the very special situation, despite campaign, despite all bad words, and everything what happened before, they are ready to organize majority and to show this good governance. What happened yesterday is this dramatic signal, because it means that Merz starts as a new chancellor, and in my opinion, I had a lot of expectations with him, and he's prepared, he's experienced, he's pro-European, he knows Russia well, he's pro-Ukrainian, he's good friend of Poland, you know, a lot of positive things, but his position is much weaker as 2 days ago. Because if he had a problem to have approval to be chancellor, it means that coming with some bills to the Bundestag, he will have the same fear, you know, what will happen. And for us, for future of Europe, that is very, very, very negative.
So why is that? Why?
But that's different. No, but that is important to understand. And I tell you, the second very negative thing what can happen, and I'm sorry that I will go a little bit too much to domestic Polish problems, is Polish presidential election. Because if after this election we'll have pro-European president, we are on the good track. If we'll have anti-European president, I didn't call the names, that's drama, because Poland is out of this important debate about the future of Europe and from the group of deciding countries. But okay, why? I think that is the problem, you know. The world changed very much at the beginning of new century. I was very lucky politician and president because I was working during what I call it time of optimism. Mm-hmm. The unbelievable, unimaginable things were possible. Enlargement of NATO, done. Enlargement of European Union, done. This march of democracies in many countries, done. You know, fantastic. And when I was too optimistic, and even in one of interview, I said that probably my generation is the luckiest generation in the history, at least in Poland. You know, pandemic started, then Russian aggression started, earlier financial crisis, in the middle migration crisis. And if you see the last 25 years of our, let's say, world, that is a time of crises. It's a time of so the first, we were not prepared to have so many crises in short time. And frankly speaking, we didn't solve these crises properly. So we still have negative consequences of financial crisis, inequality, etc., but a lot. Changes, technological changes. That is nothing new. These technological revolutions were in the history of mankind quite often. But the pace of these changes is absolutely unprecedented. It means that we are not ready to adopt all these new rules, new situations, and we have more and more people, not by definition, but by feeling excluded. They don't understand what is going. They have a lot of fears, and that is a typical voter of populists. We have a climate change again. We have a migration. So the problem of migration. That is of course, problem because we have such dilemma. How to stop illegal migration and organized crime, and how to accept migrants who are helping our labor market, our economy, etc., etc. Time, if I want to call the period of the end of 90s as a time of optimism, my definition of this new era is chaos. We live in extremely chaotic time. And we were not absolutely prepared that one day the leader of this chaos will be the democratically elected president of the United States.
But Mr. President, isn't there also an element
but let's because the question was sure. I will be brief because I see the clock. Well, our problem of this typical traditional democratic forces is we are not prepared to accept all these very, very fast changes. We lost the language. We lost the communication with the voters. We lost also this sensitivity because populists are, that is negative phenomenon, but we should listen populists sometimes because they express correctly many of real fears of the voters. We lost this sensitivity, we lost this talent, and only very few of the leaders they find some good contact with the electorate. And
right,
finally, really last point. How we can change the situation? Only by good governance. We should show Merz in Germany. He has 4 years to show that this coalition is working correctly, effectively, because if not, AfD will be the winner of the next election. That is the task for Tusk, sounds good, task for Tusk for next 2.5 years, to show that this government is effective, is okay, because until now it's not enough. If we will not show for the people, for the voters, especially young generation, that we are enough okay to manage the situation, we will lose.
I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, because you mentioned the fact that perhaps the mainstream parties do not listen adequately to people's concerns. But I also want to ask you about the fact that we are seeing a bit of a backlash against progressive policies in the United States. You mentioned President Trump, and that certainly drove his agenda. And it's driving the agenda of some of the parties you mentioned. So has the sort of progressivism has it gone too far, perhaps, in Europe?
I agree. Too far, absolutely. Too far. And that's you know, to be progressive is okay. And in my opinion, it's enough, because all these progressive, very progressive movements, they show the perspective, but they are not enough strong to win the election. And I think some kind of balance is necessary. I remember my discussion, I will not speak about the names, but one of our colleagues said during last campaign or previous campaigns about adoption of kids by homosexual couples, etc., etc. And then Kaczyński, the leader of leading party, said even that is a theory, this is a concept, political concept, how they want to change the structure of the society. Of course, bullshit, 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 but what we should understand in Poland changed very much. Poland still is a very conservative society, but changed in the last years very much. And today, and that is a sentence of, that is a substance of my discussion with this person. If we ask Polish people, you are agree for the
same-sex unions.
Same-sex is the same partnership, not
unions.
couples, unions.
Unions.
I think majority is in favor. If you ask the Polish people about the homosexual couples, 50-50. If you ask about adoption of the children, 10-15%. That is the process. This process is going faster as we thought earlier, but still not enough fast as progressives are thinking about it. And I think mistake of American Democrats was to concentrate, to focus the attention on these questions too much. And the problem of each party in Poland would be the same. In the next, I tell you, 5 years, no longer. Not to focus attention too much, of course, to protect the rules of the majority and the rights of majority, etc., but not to focus attention too much on these issues, because that is not the way to win the election.
Okay, so let's move beyond politics and let's move to security. You have been deeply involved
security is not politics?
Okay, security in the wider sense of the word,
okay.
Perhaps. So, you know, you've been deeply involved in Ukraine affairs. You've been a staunch supporter of Ukraine's European aspirations. We've seen that these peace negotiations are probably nowhere. But what is your assessment? Where are we at the moment? Is there a serious threat that the United States will abandon Ukraine?
Absolutely. It's a very serious threat, and I think that is a historical mistake of the United States. I think the historical mistake of Putin in Russia was invasion, was attack. Because if the main goal, because it's necessary to understand
you know Putin, right? You spoke to him.
Of course, I spoke, and I can quote him because he told me 2002, so many years before everything. He was a young president, I was an old president, you know. He was junior, I was senior in this discussion. It was in his private apartments in Kremlin. And he told me, I asked him, what are his goals? And he told me 2. The first is to rebuild the position of Russia on the international stage. Very obvious idea. Each president wants to do it. Okay, but the second was much more important, interesting, and dangerous. To rebuild Great Russia. We spoke in Russian language, and in Great Russia, in Russian means Великая Россия. And we know what means Великая Россия, Great Russia. Great Russia means some concept close to Tsarist Empire or Soviet Union, and it means that Belarus, and especially Ukraine is number 1, and not part of Ukraine, not Eastern Ukraine, the Crimea, no. Entire Ukraine is an element of this great Russia. Belarus is the next, Moldova is next, Caucasus, 3 countries next, Central Asia next, probably not so much Baltic states, because they are culturally different, historically was also not the same. Okay. And he told me openly, his idea. I asked him also, because he spoke very bad things about Gorbachev, not very nice about Yeltsin. I asked him, Vladimir, could you tell me who are such your heroes? Who are the best leaders in the history of
Catherine the Great.
of Russia? No, he mentioned three persons. You're right. But first was Peter the Great, Catherine the Great, and the third one, who? Who? Joseph. And what was interesting, he said not Stalin. He didn't say Joseph Stalin. He said Joseph Vissarionovich. Yosif Vissarionovich. It was such very friendly
suggestion that he was indeed Russian.
Yeah. No.
That he was part of the Russian Empire.
Yeah, he was a part. And then I started to make a joke and said, oh, I understand that you want to be number 4 on this very short list. Now, Putin started to laugh a little bit, haha. And then I added something what probably was my big mistake. Said, but see, if you will be number 4 on this list, you'll be only the second Russian. Well,
that didn't go down very well, I think.
No, it was not. And now but it was very private, long 4 hours conversation. So, but from today's perspective, I think it was my
But the jokes aside, you know,
the first. You ask me about the future. First, that is a goal of Putin, and Putin will do everything, and success of Putin the same, to have entire Ukraine the zone of Russian influence, point. And that is necessary to understand, because if we don't understand this main goal of Russian politics, we are extremely naive. Second, what Trump is doing, that is not discussion about the peace, this is discussion how to freeze the war. And everything what can be the result of this, in my opinion, very, very poor negotiations can be the frozen war. And frozen war is absolutely okay for Putin because he will buy time for organization of the troops, to produce more equipment, etc. But for Ukraine, that is drama. Because they have a situation that they are in nowhere. They cannot be serious partner for the negotiation to the European Union. That's terrible. For Trump, it's okay because I promised that I finished the war, and now I ask for Nobel Prize.
But on the other hand, the Americans signed finally the minerals deal with Ukraine.
And that's okay. That's one of few positive elements.
Moves things a little forward on the one hand, and also many analysts mentioned that, in fact, freezing the conflict may not necessarily be so bad for Ukraine if you follow the Korea blueprint. And, you know, Southern Korea thrived. The formal peace was never reached, but, you know, this proved a pretty stable solution. And South Korea managed to thrive.
If you see political situation in Korea, I don't know how much is stable, but okay. No, in my opinion, if we would propose and do that in this frozen war time, Ukraine will be the member of European Union, it would be very, very positive move. But that is possible?
Well, you should answer this question.
No,
is this possible?
In my opinion, not.
Why not?
Well, because it would be a lot of questions from many of opponents of many countries. What is Ukraine today? What is the future of Ukraine?
So you're saying internal tensions within the EU are going to prevent Ukraine
Especially
from joining?
because even without this war, even without all these problems, to have Ukraine as a member of the European Union is a very complicated process.
So maybe
you will have Polish farmers against, you will have a lot of in Romania, in other countries, etc. That is by definition difficult. And today, having the war, having the situation that the status of the territory is not fully decided, etc., that is really the problem. If we will have, and that is my appeal to European politicians, if we will have enough strength to say, okay, despite all this situation, we want to have Ukraine on our side, and to accept this pro-Western orientation of Ukraine would be historical success of Europe. But it's necessary to do it. I'm not so sure that we are ready to do it.
Mr. President, thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you very much.